After a year, Caesar's term as consul came to an end. It had been a great success, but he was desperate short of money again. He spent everything on his grand lifestyle, including thousands of bribes. And as an ex-consul, though, he was entitled to become a governor in one or more of Roman provinces outside Italy. If he picked the right province, he was able to make another fortune and demonstrate his skill as a brilliant military leader. At the same time, he took charge of two provinces in Gaul and one in Illyricum, but that wasn't enough for Caesar. He recruited an army of 50,000 men and prepared to invade part of Gaul, which wasn't yet under Rome's control. For the next 2 years, he fought the local tribes in Gaul until he had defeated them all. Every time he won a battle, he wrote a gripping account of it and made sure that the news got back to Rome. Each victory meant plenty cash too, as he demanded a huge sum of money from the defeat tribal chiefs. But his ambitions didn't end in Gaul. Next, he decided to take across army of the Rhine River into Germany, where no Roman generals had gone before. Germans had already heard what Caesar has done in Gaul. Many of them were so terrified they surrendered without fight. Others fled in their villages to join allies and wait for Caesar's attack, but he didn't attack. After stopping the corn they left behind, burning everyone else, Caesar just left. Following the tribes into the dense forest in the heat of Germany would be too dangerous. He decided besides he didn't need to do anymore. Most of the Germans near the Rhine had been crushed. Wouldn't be any trouble for some time to come. He won fame back to the home simply by crossing the Rhine, but he wasn't ready to return to Rome just yet. He still had Britain to deal with. The Britons had been helping with Gauls and resistant Romans, and Caesar wanted to teach them a lesson. Few Romans had ever set foot in Britain. That didn't worry him. He marched his army to the coast and led the flood of ships across the English Channel. But the Britons had been warned on the invasion, and when they were armed, ready, meeting when Caesar's men arrived, they were soon met by a force of ferocious British warriors bearing down on them with their chariots and splitting up their ranks. Among first, the Britons' attack caused confusion among the Roman troops, but they soon rallied around and drove the Britons back, even though it wasn't immediate and overwhelming victory as Caesar had hoped for. So things were going as well as Caesar had expected. He thought that the Britons would be so terrified just at the sight of the Roman army that they would surrender immediately. He certainly was prepared for a fierce resistance. After only 18 days, he decided to leave. He hadn't achieved much yet except the glory of being the first Roman general ever to lay Britain. Even so, back in Rome, Caesar was a hero again. Over a year later, Caesar decided to try again. This time, he defeated the British tribe, but they knew they would rebel again. As soon as his back was turned, it would take a lot of effort and money to keep the group under control, and it was simply was worth it. So Caesar went back to Gaul, content and that some people of Rome would be impressed and thrilled by his latest victory. But there were bad news waiting for him. His daughter Julia had died giving birth. Caesar was devastated, but he was worried too. As Pompey's wife Julie had bound Pompey to Caesar, however, would Pompey remain his ally? At the time, question is moving time. Caesar was away. A group of senators were busy stirring up the trouble from him back in Rome. Who does he think? They said in Pompeii. He has too much power for his own good. Or more to the point, Pompeii too much power for your own good. For everyone knows I'm the greatest general Rome had ever had, Pompey replied. But people could just tell he was getting jealous. Meanwhile, as two groups competed for power in Rome, the ordinary people were becoming restless. There were riots and they even burned down the senator's house. The government headquarters and senator could only think of one solution. They elected Pompey as sole council, gave him an emergency power to restore order. By now, Pompey was so jealous of Caesar that he turned against him, gave the order to Caesar, who was still in Gaul, to disband his army and return to Rome alone, or to be declared a traitor. Caesar was furious. Pompey had put him in an impossible situation. If he went back alone, Pompey would have him executed in a moment, but if he brought his army, Pompey would see as if it was declaring a war. There was no alternate war it would have. With 8,000 soldiers, Caesar set off on a long journey to Rome. After 10 days, they reached the Rubicon. The river marked the boundary between Gaul and Italy. If they crossed, Caesar knew he would be at once be branded a traitor back home. He halted his men so that they could rest, and he turned to face them. It's not too late to stop and cry, but if we cross the Rubicon, there'll be no going back. Then Caesar jumped on his horse and rode across the river. His men followed. War had begun. As they marched on, more and more soldiers flocked to join them. People came out to drove to cheer them on. Terrified by what was happening, Pompey and some of the senators fled to Greece. When Caesar and his army finally arrived in Rome, no one tried to stop them from entering the city. And when he declared himself supreme dictator of Rome for a year, some people didn't like it, but few protests outlawed. Rome wasn't finally in Caesar's power. 3 months later, had taken completely control of Italy and defeated some of Pompey's forces in Spain. It was time for a final showdown. He realized Pompey wasn't going to come back to Rome to fight, so he decided to go after him. Leading 20,600 soldiers down to the coast, he and his men set sail for Greece. Meanwhile, Pompey was marching his army of 42,000 men east, away from Caesar, but Caesar was hot on his heels. The two armies came face to face at a place called Pharsalus. Caesar had sent for reinforcements, but they happened to arrive. It was going to be tough being Pompey's huge army, but there wasn't time to wait. All he could do was attack. Caesar uh, may not have had as many men, but they were highly skilled commanders. The battle was soon over, and Caesar won. As soon Pompey saw that the things were going badly for him, he fled to Alexandria. In Egypt, with Caesar in pursuit, the advisor of the young Egyptian ruler Ptolemy were afraid of Caesar. Hoping to please him, they have Pompey killed. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria, he was presented with Pompey's ring and silver head. Caesar was now the sole leader of the Roman world. Chapter 6. Cleopatra. Caesar had never wanted to kill Pompey, and genuinely liked the man. Life was certainly easy now that he was dead. It wasn't all plain sailing though. He still had plenty to do. For a start, he badly needed to pay his army. Luckily, the Egyptians owned Roman money, so Caesar declared that he wasn't going anywhere. So they had paid him. He made himself comfortable in an apartment in the royal palace. Egypt was on the verge of civil Egypt was on the verge of civil war. The country was ruled jointly by Ptolemy and his sister Cleopatra, but the pair they detested one another. Caesar decided to arrange a meeting and try to settle their differences. The evening before the meeting, there was a knock at the door. A slave ushered in a young Egyptian carrying a rolled up blanket under his arm. The man lowered his bundle and announced delivery. To Caesar's amazement, a beautiful young woman tumbled on the blanket. Ptolemy isn't fit to run Egypt, Cleopatra declared. He's only 14 and he doesn't even speak Egyptian. And he completely under the thumb of the treacherous Greek, Pothinus. I should be the one to rule our country. Caesar was impressed. Cleopatra was not only beautiful, but proud, intelligent, and full of determination. He would help her. After all, her brother had been responsible for Pompey's death. It would do Caesar no harm in Rome to side against Pompey's murder. Besides, Cleopatra was absolutely captivating. The next day, Ptolemy arrived early for the meeting and was astonished to find Cleopatra already there. As it dawned on him what had happened, he became absolutely furious and stormed out of the place. This won't be the end of the matter, he snarled. Ptolemy was right. His scheming advisor Pothinus had secretly sent for the Egyptian army. Soon there were 20,000 soldiers marching on Alexandria. Caesar was in big trouble. His own army was a fraction of this size. Before long, Ptolemy had controlled most of the city and Caesar was trapped in the palace. The palace was well protected so the Egyptians could break into it. But they were happy to wait. Caesar's food supply wouldn't last forever, but Roman reinforcements were on their way. If he could hold out long enough, a few moments later, thousands of Roman soldiers poured into Egypt. After fierce and bloody battles, Ptolemy was finally defeated. He tried to make his escape by swimming out of the ship heading down to the Nile, but he drowned before he could reach safety. Now Cleopatra was in control, and Caesar knew he could rely on her to keep Egypt loyal to Rome. After a few blissful weeks of cruising down the Nile with Cleopatra, it's time for Caesar to leave. Chapter 7, Dictator Rome. When Caesar finally got back to Rome, the Senate awarded him 4 triumphs. Caesar decided to celebrate in style. Holding them all in the same month, there were to be the greatest victory celebrations ever seen. There were parades with dozens of elephants, plays, gladiator contests, chariot race, even a mock naval battle. Captured kings and warlords were paraded down the street in chains, and everyone gorged on a sumptuous feast. Meanwhile, The Senate was